Could we see some changes on Auburn's offensive line?
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. We're hanging out with Justin Ferguson of the Auburn Observer. And Ferg, I mean, you just got done covering a full day's worth of media stuff for Auburn's fall camp coverage. And I mean, Hugh Freeze really got Friday going, talking about, hey, Connor Lew's doing great and he's making the right calls, but it's not really making its way all the way down the offensive line. And then he credits offensive tackle Tyler Johnson, who he assumed was kind of the number 3 tackle. That may not be the case. He gives love to Ronan Chambers, the Akron transfer. I mean, do you think, it's kind of been the same O-line all spring and all fall.
Right.
Do you think they're trying to change things up in the last second?
I think it could be a situation of calling somebody out or, trying out different options. But yeah, it was interesting because Freeze comes out and says that when we're out at practice today, I didn't see really anything different. But then later on, we have interviews afterwards and player interviews, and Percy Lewis is one of them. Percy Lewis tells us, hey, today I worked on the right side at right tackle some, and he said he was with the twos. So that Tyler Johnson was getting some more work at left tackle, on Friday. So, it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see if that's where they end up going. He talked to, Freeze also talked about maybe Dylan Wade, maybe moving a position. It was really interesting. Like, I think it's, that 5 that we've seen all offseason, really, that's the one they want. But, if it's not getting the best results, there's still some time to kind of tweak and adjust. So that's something that I know some Auburn fans, it took some folks by surprise today. And it kind of has been as well. I mean, the word about fall camp so far had been, offensive line's doing good. They're progressing. I thought Jake Thorne was really honest a couple of weeks ago when he was talking about where guys needed to improve. But it could get to the point where you might see some mixing and matching here down the stretch.
It's just weird, the timing of this, right? Like, it didn't seem like they were doing this at the start of fall camp, and they didn't do a whole lot of it even back in spring. It's just, I just wonder what prompted that. Was it Tyler Johnson being similar to Too Tall a year ago, where he's just like, hey, he's too good to keep off the field, so we've got to figure some stuff out and move some people around? It's just interesting how long it seemed to take them to identify it, Ferg.
Yeah, and with Freeze coming out and saying, hey, it's my, offensive line right now is my biggest concern. I do think it's been prompted by, like, I thought, reading between the lines with Freeze, I thought they'd probably be farther along at this point. And so it's, do you make a change? Do you switch things up just to find it? Because I do think the other thing that's been interesting about fall camp is that we've heard a lot about the second team offensive line, about how well they've done. So
the depth,
Jake Thornton talked about, hey, there's not a ton of difference between our ones and our twos a couple of weeks ago. So if that's truly the case, right here, right before you start to get into extended game week prep for the opener, maybe trying out something different and seeing if that could be a move. Or, again, it could just be kind of rattling the cage a little bit and just being like, hey, nothing's guaranteed. We've had you guys at this starting 5 all off season, but that doesn't mean you can just coast into the, we still need to get better. And if we don't think that this is the best lineup and the best look for our front, we can and will change it.
Yeah. What'd you make of Freeze's comments about QB2, where it's like, okay, obviously Payton's QB1. At this point of the process of the offseason, you need to start cutting down reps and giving them to QB1 and QB2. And he's like, yeah, I know who it is. Our staff all agrees, but we haven't talked to the quarterback, so we can't tell you guys yet. Do you read into that? I mean, does that mean it's Holden, because Holden always goes second whenever we see it? Do you think it's Hank? Is there a long shot chance that it's Walker, the true freshman? Where are you with who is QB2?
If I had to put money on it, I would say it'd be Holden, because he's just the second guy we constantly see. And then today at practice, we saw him working with some of the ones and with the running backs at times. So I think that's kind of a signal there. But I mean, it makes sense for Freeze to be like, yeah, I haven't told these guys yet, so I ain't telling y'all. That's 100% how it should go. I think it's the worst thing in the world when players find out stuff on social media or, from stuff that we say. Like, it's the worst thing to go about. But yeah, no, I would bet it would be Holden. But I mean, it's interesting to see. Like, I thought in the scrimmage last Saturday, I thought Holden played well. I thought Hank Brown made some really, really good throws, and I thought Walker White had some high moments at times. The thing with Walker is just like, yeah, he's a freshman. He's doing some freshman things right now. It's going to take some time, and I don't think anybody was as talented as Walker White is. I don't think anybody was bringing him in this year to think he could be the guy this year. I think that was always a long shot. I would probably go with Holden because we've heard so much about this offense being like experience, decision making, familiarity, and Geriner just has that edge from being around here longer than the other two guys, and so it would be interesting. Now, if Freeze came out next week and said, "Hey, Hank Brown's our number 2," it wouldn't shock me, but it would be a little bit of a pivot from what we've seen, for most of camp.
Yeah, the rep thing wouldn't make as much sense then. So, yeah, because I think I assume everybody, like, whenever we went out there, it's like, okay, well, is the order still the same? And it's the same order that it's been since spring, Payton, Holden, Hank, Walker, and nothing changed. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting. And the fact that he said that everybody was in agreement on it, which makes me think it's not close. If that's the case,
right.
Like if the whole coaching staff, it's like, yeah, we just all know we're all on the same page. It's like, okay, like there must be some separation there.
Yeah. And again, like it would be interesting if that's different from what we've been seeing. Like, I think there have been times I go back to, there was one time an assistant coach, this is several years ago. One time an assistant coach, we were out there during camp and we were like writing stuff down, and assistant coach walked over and told us, sometimes we just throw some stuff out here to, mess with y'all. The previous staffs that had done that, I don't really see that in this staff. The staff's pretty open and pretty transparent, especially when it comes to what they're doing out there on the practice field and what they're telling us.
Yeah, I mean, there's moments where I always end up standing by the defensive line towards the end of our window, and you can just hear Vontrell. He's like a foot from us, and he's just coaching up these. He doesn't care who's watching. He's focused on coaching up his defensive lineman. Like, that is his sole focus, and the passion is just there on this staff. Yeah, I don't think they're doing any of that.
Yeah, they're not playing any games. Yeah, to your similar to that, they finished up the Indy period when we were out there today.
Yeah,
one-on-ones, and I'm standing in the end zone watching some of them, and like Marcus Davis is like 2 feet from me, and he's really telling Malcolm Simmons and I think it was Simmons at that time, just all these ins and outs and stuff like that. And it's just like, I'm standing right there, and it's, like, it's like I'm not there at all, which is a good thing. That's just how it's supposed to be. It's just, I think there's that transparency and that trust out there. So yeah, it's been cool. I mean, you watch practice, even whether it's a full scrimmage or an extended period of time, or just, Indy drills like we saw on Friday. Like, you're gonna see a lot of hard coaching, and that's the identity of this group.
Yeah, and it's just the passion behind it too. I mean, it's just seems so
Charles
heavy
Kelly,
with all of it.
If you've ever watched Charles Kelly go through a practice, you have seen Mr. Energy. Durkin's got that as well, but I always go back to Charles Kelly.
So I think Vontrell's got it. I think Aldridge has got it. I mean, you just mentioned Marcus. Like, this is a passionate coaching staff, which kind of reflects Freeze, right? I mean, I think he's going after a certain type for sure, and it also explains why they recruit so well. It's because they're so like 100% in on what they're doing at that time, and I can see them all sitting down with a player and their family, just being 100% in to like everything that's happening there. So, I mean, it's easy to see why they're finding success. No question about it. We're going to get a few just kind of general fall camp thoughts from you in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel's America's #1 sportsbook right now. FanDuel, they've got something every single day for the remainder of the summer. They're hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. And look, they get that right now, the sportses aren't sportsing like they typically do. So you want to get ready. You want to get ready because, boy, it is so close. We are so close to football. So go ahead and make sure you're ready for this football season by heading over to FanDuel.com, and you can make the most out of the rest of the summer. Then, of course, get ready for this fall. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the Locked On Podcast Network. Ferg, when you look at this roster and how this coaching staff talks about this roster, just the jump from last year to this year, it just continues to get more and more substantial the more we learn about these receivers and the more we learn about the depth on the offensive line and how some of these true freshman defensive players are really doing so well that, I don't think they're going to be able to keep some of these guys off the field, like Malik Blockton and Amaris Williams. I mean, I know you think about it, like what we saw this time a year ago versus now. I mean, it truly is remarkable.
It is. And I think the biggest difference with this team is I think you're seeing quality depth. I think what you're seeing is a team that was able to get a full year of recruiting at a high level, of working the transfer portal, of building a roster, of retaining guys. And last year at this time, it was who's playing what position, who's going to start here. We've had pretty good familiarity with that for most of this camp. And so I think for Auburn, I think it's just a testament to being able to rebuild a program, right? And that goes beyond just what happens on Saturdays. And it's the recruiting, it's the development, it's the retention. And I think the top end talent, the overall talent level of this team, I don't think it's drastically like that much better than it was last year. Like, it's one of those, I think they're a better team. I don't think they're Georgia, Alabama good yet in terms of your overall talent, but they have quality depth. And what we see is those teams that have been able to contend at a high level in the SEC year in and year out. Yeah. They're able to let, a bunch of guys play, keep them fresh, go through the grind of a season. And I think that's really going to help. So you see freshmen who might not be starters this season. You mentioned Malik Blockton and Amaris Williams. DeMarcus Riddick is another one. Several of those receivers that we've seen and heard about a ton. Those guys might not be day one starters, but if they can give you quality reps and quality plays, that's better for the whole team all year long. Because not only are you going to see iron sharpens iron, you guys are going to be fresher. And, especially when you think about how much Auburn in the fourth quarter last season just did not have the horses on defense. That's the big thing for me is the quality depth on that defensive front is so huge. But you're seeing it in other spots as well, wide receiver being another big one.
You were on The Drive on ESPN 167. You and Bill Cameron were talking about just the quality depth, but I mean, you kind of said, I don't want to take words out of your mouth, I'm paraphrasing here, but I believe you kind of said, hey, like starting's cool and all, but there's going to be 20 guys on both sides of the ball that are essentially starters when it comes to total snaps. And Auburn didn't have, I mean, there were times where Chandler Wooten and Zacoby McClain and Owen Papo, they'd play like 80 or 90 snaps in a game. It was absurd. It was absurd. Your linebackers wouldn't come off the field. And there's not any position group now where you look at that and say, yes, that should happen. Like that's just insane to think about when you look at this roster now.
Yeah, and fall camp to me has been less about who's going to start and who's going to be that crew, right? It's the can Spooty Kite and J.C. Hart and Jay Crawford be your dudes at corner? Is Amaris Williams and Kebron Crawford, are those two guys ready to roll for you on the defensive front? How many defensive tackles can you trust? How many of these wide receivers can actually play? That was the big question, and I think you've learned a lot of that this year, and that's what makes you a good football team. It's what makes you a good football program, because you're better prepared when injuries happen, and they're going to happen. But additionally, it's like guys are going to stay fresher. I keep going back to the example this past year, like Mykel Williams at Georgia. Potential number 1 overall pick. Go look at Mykel Williams' snap count last year at Georgia. Very few times was he playing more than like 30 snaps a game. And it's just all 30 of those snaps, though, 30, 35 snaps a game. He was just a terror when that happened. And I think Auburn just needs to feel like Auburn needs to get to a position where they feel like they can do that much more often with their best players, because that's how you have the horses to compete in December.
Yeah. Who do you think, because a big battle is just the market share of snaps in the defensive backfield. And, Friday morning when Freeze talked about those guys, he talked about how inconsistent that next group is. He did say JC Hart was the most consistent of that next group. If you had to predict who the number 3 corner is behind Kayin Lee and Keontae Scott, is it JC Hart, Antonio Kite, or is it somebody else like Jay Crawford?
I think it would be Hart right now. I think
so too.
The word about Kite continues to be he's got the talent, he's got everything we want. He just needs to be more consistent. And look, playing corner is tough. Playing consistent corner is tough. One of the things that stood out to me on Friday from Friday's practice, I don't know how much time you were ever watching the corners. Watch Kayin Lee take reps, and it's like that was a dude who went through the fire last year, and he's got that consistency because he's a really, really talented player on top of it. But like they don't have that in that second wave yet. I think one of the positive things about Auburn having 5 home games to start the year should be favored in the first 4. You know, you're going to be able to get JC Hart and Jay Crawford and Antonio Kite and some of those safeties as well. Really good reps. Amon Lane Gaines, especially a guy who can come in and play nickel for you at times. So like I think that's the thing for Auburn is like that group is inconsistent. They're going to get some time to learn, especially if Keontae Scott, who was back out there looking like he was going, he was obviously had stuff wrapped up on that leg, but he was going out there in a full contact and all that. If they can keep Scott and Lee healthy and Champ Anthony continues to progress like he does at nickel, they can give those guys the quality reps that they need to make it through the season without necessarily having to be like, I think of Kayin Lee last year. He held up, but it was like, hey, bud, go start. You're going to have to, and that's tough to do. But when you have that depth, you're able to kind of lean on those guys more. So, I would say it was probably Hart just because he's been the most consistent one, but I think they're going to need all of them. And I think Jay Crawford's probably been the guy that I think I'm coming out of fall camp probably the most impressed with because I thought, maybe could be in line for red shirt. They've talked about him very similar to Hart and Kite in terms of like, hey, we're going to need this dude.
We saw those highlights of him and Cam Coleman going up against each other at the Under Armour All-American practice or something. I forget which one was which, but I mean, they went after it. And if you can go after it against Cam Coleman, you could do it against anybody. So
I agree.
I'm really high on Jay Crawford as well, for sure. Ferg, how can people check out everything you've got going on, man?
Yeah, AuburnObserver.com. Check it out. $45 for your first year at the Observer. If you sign up between now and the start of the year, it's 25% off. We're putting out stuff pretty much every day. It's been a lot. I mean, I've got a ton of stuff from practices this week, podcasts as well. We email everything out to you as soon as it drops. AuburnObserver.com. Check it out there.
Yeah, it's worth it. Be sure to check it out. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you next time. This has been Locked On Auburn.